Part 1. March dusk painted the hills in bruised purples as I eased out of our shared home, careful not to wake Emily. I just uncovered her betrayal, and by sunrise I'd be halfway up Redwood Ridge, clutching nothing but the clothes on my back and the hollow ache of a 3-year marriage unraveling. A year later, she tracked me down, breathless on the dusty porch of my rented cabin, eyes glossy with regret as she begged for a second chance. I stood by the pine railing, wind tugging at my jacket, wondering how our story had twisted so far from those first sparks. I still can't pinpoint exactly why I'm putting this on paper, but maybe someone out there will find solace in my mess of mistakes. It's been 2 years since I moved away, and I've rebuilt my life from the ground up. Rewind to early 2019, when I was closing deals as a freelance systems consultant, 3-day sprints here, week-long marathons there, but with enough evenings at home to think I was present. Emily, by contrast, had just been promoted to senior director at Halcyon Marketing, commanding boardrooms and late-night strategy sessions downtown. Back then, our marriage felt rock solid, like an open flame that never flickered. We first met at a summer barbecue hosted by a mutual friend in June of 2014. I was still the scruffy tech geek, she the poised communications whiz. Our banter clicked, jokes flew fast, and within weeks we were inseparable, tearing off work badges and tossing them into a drawer whenever we crashed at each other's apartments. By August 2015, we were officially us, signing a lease on a bright 2-bedroom flat while saving for a mortgage. Those days, our world revolved around shared playlists and lazy Sunday hikes. But sometime after our 3rd anniversary, cracks began to form. I noticed her shrug at my compliments, sharp words over trivial things. You left the kitchen light on again? Or did you even read my email? Until the late nights piled up, networking events, client dinners, team building retreats that dragged her away 3 to 4 evenings a week. Whenever I asked, she'd flash that corporate smile, the one she used when sealing a major deal, and say it was crucial for her climb. Jack, you jet off for days at a time, she'd point out, tapping her Rolex. Who am I to question my own career? In truth, I only took long trips every 6 weeks, usually a 3 or 4-day client visit. But mentioning that always seemed to fuel the fire, so I let it drop. I never suspected infidelity beneath her crisp business suits, chalking up our dwindling intimacy to stress. Sure, my ego flinched each time she turned away, but I fooled myself with logic. Her workload was insane. And though she kept a company-issued phone buzzing in her hand, I never saw the hidden messages other people warned about. Then, in late July 2018, a pink lace strap peeped from beneath the passenger seat as I helped unload groceries. My heart thudded like a jackhammer. That bra was hers, no doubt, and I froze, blood rushing to my ears. Emily, thinking I'd seen ghosts, peered at me over her towel as I stalked upstairs, bags in hand. I forced a joke, but underneath I felt something crack. That night, I crafted a plan. I'd play the devoted husband, cook her favorite meal, roasted salmon, her grandmother's lemon butter sauce, candlelight, the whole 9 yards, hoping to lure out the truth. But when she walked in, she only paused to swap her blazer for a cocktail dress before slipping out to catch up with the team. A snack was all she offered. My anger coiled tight as I watched her silhouette vanish down the street. In a blur, I yanked my work phone off the charger and lobbed it into her back seat. An unspoken test, a small rebellion. Then I swept the dinner into the trash and flicked off the lights, the scent of burnt garlic lingering like a ghost. Moments later, Emily reappeared, fresh and radiant as ever. "Ready for dinner?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. I shrugged, voice low. "Why not go out with your friends?" She laughed, sharp and brittle, before storming past me. Standing alone in that silent kitchen, I realized I was done playing the fool. Tomorrow, I'd decide whether to confront her or vanish entirely. Either way, something had to give. Part 2. A sliver of moonlight glanced off my phone as I switched on the second SIM card. My heart thudded so loud I thought the bar's walls would shake. I tapped into Emily's work line and trailed it down Highway 7, every red light stretching my nerves tight. When I reached the Rusty Nail, its red neon buzzed like an accusation. Through the steamed-up windshield, I spotted her slipping from the back door, her dark coat flung over one arm, laughter ringing against the brick. A tall man in a gray suit, someone I recognized from her LinkedIn feed, waited. Their bodies pressed close, and I watched him brush a strand of hair from her face before leaning in for a kiss. My stomach flipped. A cold knot of rage and grief knotted inside me. They climbed into a sleek black sedan, headlights carving arcs through the mist. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror, saw Emily's silhouette settle into his lap, then floored the accelerator. The chase took us 3 miles to the Bluewood Inn, where their car idled under a flickering lamp. I watched them slip through the lobby doors together, and something inside me snapped. My knuckles left dents in the steering wheel as I sat in the dark, breath ragged. Images of our wedding vows, her smiling face, my trembling voice, flashed against my mind's eye. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, rain mingling with tears I refused to let fall. Finally, I jerked the wheel toward anywhere but here. An hour later, I stumbled into the Barn Owl, a cozy tavern 30 miles out of town. The warm glow of Edison bulbs and the scent of pine-smoked whiskey wrapped around me. I slid onto a stool, and Sarah, polished and empathetic behind the bar, slid a whiskey neat across the counter. "On the house," she said softly, noting the brutal mess on my face. I clutched the glass like a lifeline, the burn in my throat pulling me back from the edge. A few stools down, a broad-shouldered guy in a flannel shirt nodded in my direction. I recognized that same haunted look. He introduced himself as Luke, voice low and steady. In that dim corner, I unraveled. I told him how I'd followed Emily's phone, how I'd watched her with that man in the gray suit, how my world had splintered. Luke's eyes never flickered. He offered a reassuring hand. "I've walked this road, buddy. You're at a fork. Stay stuck in this pain, or steer yourself towards something new." His words sank in like rain into thirsty soil. Even through the haze of betrayal, I knew he spoke truth. When I asked what he meant, he leaned closer. "I've got a trailer on my ranch, Maple Creek. Rough around the edges, but it's mine. If you need to vanish for a spell, it's yours. No charge. You can breathe out there. Start fresh." Sarah chimed in with her own hard-won wisdom. "My ex did me dirt, too," she said, polishing a glass. "I ran to the coast, lived in my car for weeks. Saved me." I laughed at the irony, finding hope in a rusty trailer. But inside, a spark ignited. Before dawn broke, Luke scribbled directions on a napkin. We shook on it, a pact sealed over last calls and fading jukebox tunes. I left a few bills for Sarah and stepped back into the cold night, feeling, strangely, lighter. Returning home was like stepping into a lie. The hallway smelled of laundry and stale coffee. Emily's heels clacked as she came into view. I slid onto the couch instead of greeting her. "Where have you been?" she asked, voice clipped. I met her eyes. "Out," I said. "With friends." Her brow arched. "You look gone." "Maybe I am," I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. She opened her mouth, then closed it, confusion flickering on her face. Without another word, she stalked off to our bedroom. I lay awake, half expecting her to call me back. But sleep was a stranger, my mind replaying every moment at the bar and the inn. Finally, I dialed Luke's number and set a time to meet at Maple Creek Ranch that Saturday. When the day arrived, the drive felt like a pilgrimage. Rolling hills and rusted fence posts slid past the window as I neared the ranch entrance. Luke met me with a broad grin, guiding me down a gravel drive flanked by pines heavy with morning mist. There it sat, a 28-foot trailer painted faded hunter green. The metal siding was dented, windows streaked with dust, but inside was a compact sanctuary, wood-paneled walls, a twin bed with a plaid blanket, a kitchenette complete with retro stove. Sunlight slanted through a small skylight, illuminating floating motes of dust like tiny lanterns. I ran my hand along the counter and breathed in deep. Freedom tasted like chipped laminate and fresh pine air. The trailer came with an old rocking chair and a stack of well-worn books on the shelf. My stomach eased for the first time in weeks. I handed Luke the cash we'd agreed on. His handshake was firm. "Welcome home," he said, and I realized he meant it in more ways than one. Driving away from my old life, I stole one last glance at our house. Emily's car sat silent in the driveway. The silhouette of our bedroom window felt like a stage where my last act had played out. But I no longer belonged in that scene. The wheels of my new home hummed beneath me as I headed down the dirt road. Ahead lay quiet mornings, starlit nights, and the promise of a life rebuilt one plank, one sunrise at a time. Part 3. The morning sun spilled gold across the trailer's roof as I hooked up the tow bar to my truck. Maple Creek Ranch lay silent except for birdsong and the rustle of wind through pine needles. I ran a hand over the trailer's faded green siding, feeling the weight of every decision that had led me here. Luke's directions had been flawless. Down the gravel drive, past the old windmill, and up the gentle incline to where a mossy clearing waited. Childhood memories of summer camps and youthful freedom flooded back as I coasted over the ridge. Below, the cabin's porch light winked at me like a beacon of possibility. I climbed up the narrow steps and swung open the door, greeted by the faint scent of wood smoke mixed with pine. Inside, the trailer felt both snug and spacious, an alcove of reclaimed life. I plugged in the extension cord and flipped on the tiny overhead lamp. Its warm glow danced off rustic wood paneling. Stepping outside, I surveyed the trails that snaked through scrub oak and wildflowers. Every turn held promise, a hidden creek glinting in the sun, a cluster of elderberry bushes heavy with berries, the distant silhouette of mountain peaks crowned in snow. My pulse steadied as I inhaled deep, tasting crisp air as liberating as any therapy session. Back in the city, my apartment had felt like a gilded cage. Over the past month, I tried to pull Emily back with conversations that ricocheted into denials so vicious they made me question my own sanity. I remember the night I'd cornered her in the kitchen, flicking the overhead light on full. One more lie, and this is over. She looked me straight in the eye, voice icy. You have no proof. You're inventing paranoia. Her denials were surgical, slicing through my confidence. Each time I confronted her about her late nights, she weaponized my love as evidence of weakness. Why can't you trust me? She demanded, arms crossed over her chest. I'd flinched under her gaze, doubt creeping in until I told myself I was the fool forever questioning her. But that lingering bra under the supermarket seat and the bar parking lot scene burned away my self-doubt. In the parking lot of the Rusty Nail, I'd watched Emily wrap herself around a colleague like a prize and felt ice flood my veins. I recoiled, fist smashing the sedan's steering wheel, and fled that night toward the Barn Owl, where Luke's kindness sparked the idea of escape. Packing up my life felt strangely empowering. With Emily on that week-long work trip, I moved under the radar quiet trips up the elevator, arms laden with boxes of my things. I heard her voice echo in the hall outside the door, but I ignored it, focusing instead on packing my battered guitar, my worn journals, and the tiny terrarium I built last year. One afternoon, I found myself staring at our wedding photo, glazed smiles trapped behind glass. Carefully, I removed it from its frame and slid it into a box labeled personal. The next layer was our shared cookbooks. She'd always loved crafting Italian meals, while I preferred tinkering with cocktails. I donated them both, severing even the scent of garlic that once lingered in our kitchen. By the time Emily's flight touched down, I'd moved half my world to the trailer. When she called at midnight, her voice muffled with jet lag, asking, "Where are you?" I simply let the phone ring. The next morning, I texted one word: gone. Driving away from the city with the setting sun at my back, I didn't look once in the rearview mirror. The skyline, once a symbol of our shared life, receded like a bad memory. I felt my shoulders loosen, each mile erasing a little more of the betrayal sting. At the trailer, I laid out my few belongings: camping mug, the beat-up suitcase with extra clothes, my laptop in its protective sleeve. I plugged in my phone charger, tested the tiny fridge, and sighed at the hum of the mini heater clicking on. For the first time since discovering her affair, I felt a glimmer of peace. Nights settled in with spectacular clarity. I walked outside after dinner, wrapped in my favorite flannel, and stared at a sky strewn with stars. No city lights to dull their brilliance, just the constellations I'd learned in Boy Scouts guiding me toward a new horizon. Mornings were filled with routine I actually looked forward to. I laced up my running shoes and followed the service road as dawn cracked overhead. The crisp air burned my lungs in the best possible way. At the creek's edge, I paused to watch sunbeams dance on rippling water, hearing only my breath and the soft drip of melting frost. Back on the porch, over a strong cup of coffee, I journaled every thought that threatened to stir old wounds. No more whiskey-fueled self-pity, just honesty on paper. The trailer's small desk held my notebook and a jar of homemade granola I'd thrown together, an emblem of new habits forming. Once, when checking emails, I saw Emily's name in my inbox. My heart seized for a moment, but I didn't open the message. I had nothing left to say to her, no explanation she deserved. Instead, I deleted it, the click of the trash folder a satisfying punctuation mark. Friendships at the ranch blossomed slowly but meaningfully. Neighbors stopped by with fresh eggs and jars of pickles, curious about the new guy. I returned the favor with strong coffee and stories of city life before it all fell apart. One afternoon, a neighbor named Mara invited me to a potluck. Conversations ranged from wildlife sightings to local legends. I realized I was no longer defined by Emily's betrayal, but by the community forging around me. One week, I received a postcard from Emily's work retreat, a glossy shot of a sunny beach and words like, "Wish you were here." I stared at it for a long moment, then slipped it into my journal as proof of how far I'd come. The postcard rested between pages like an artifact from a past life. By the end of that first month, I had routines that filled my days with purpose and calm. I tended a small garden beside the cabin, tomatoes, basil, and marigolds to keep pests away. Evening light filtered through leaves onto my veranda swing, where I'd sit and read until my eyelids drooped. Though the wound still throbbed when I let my guard down, the pain had become part of my story rather than its center. I realized betrayal meant she'd failed to honor our vows, but it didn't strip me of my worth. The trailer, once a refuge, had become a home. Standing on the porch one crisp morning, I inhaled the scent of evergreen and possibility. Behind me, the door clicked closed, a symbol of doors that only I got to open or shut. Ahead lay uncharted trails, friendships yet to form, and a life unburdened by her deception. And in that light, with every star above and every pine needle below, I understood this was only the beginning. Part 4. I'd rehearsed the end 1,000 times in my head, imagining Emily's confession as the final twist, proof that would unleash righteous fury. But when my inbox finally pinged with her lawyer's notice in June 2018, it felt anticlimactic. She'd hired an attorney and was filing for divorce. I stared at the email subject line, tapped archive, and moved on. In the weeks that followed, her messages shifted from pleading to petulant. "You're a coward," one read. "Come home and talk this out." Another, "I need closure. Please answer me." I let them drift past unread. I didn't want her mapping my new life, didn't want Emily poking around the ranch or the trailer I'd come to call home. Eventually, I changed my number and watched her texts bounce into limbo. By late summer, the formal papers arrived. "If you agree to an uncontested divorce, I will drop the motions." No more frantic messages, no more midnight calls. I clicked agree one afternoon while sipping coffee on the trailer's tiny porch. Within days, the divorce was finalized. No dramatic showdown, no courtroom theatrics, just the silent acknowledgement that some vows aren't meant to last forever. Life after Emily settled into an unexpected, simple rhythm. I spent mornings jogging the forest trails, midsummer sun glittering through the pines. One evening, I met Lucy, just a few years younger, at the little general store a mile down the road. I helped her change a flat tire outside the store. She called me her mountain man, with a grin that made my chest tighten in a good way. We swapped numbers, but I didn't rush things. No ring in sight. Just laughter over campfire esmores and quiet talks under a sky so clear you could almost touch the stars. I didn't rush to leave the trailer. I liked the unburdened life. A kitchenette that made simple meals feel like feasts, a bookshelf with battered paperbacks, and a porch swing that cradled me each evening. My grief eased in step with my pace of life. There was no longer a constant ache for what I'd lost, only gratitude for what I'd gained, peace, perspective, and the freedom to chart my own course. Then one crisp autumn morning, as I walked into town for groceries, I spotted Emily through the cafe window. My heart lurched, but I didn't duck. She waved, and before I could think, I found myself walking across Main Street to meet her. Her eyes were red around the edges. She wore a simple ponytail, jeans, and a tank top that clung to the arms where she once squeezed my hand. "Jack," she said, voice catching on the name. I nodded, arms loose at my sides. I suggested the bench outside the bakery. The sun warmed the wooden slats as we sat. She started with compliments, my beard, my fitness, and I felt the old tug of familiarity. But I reminded myself that familiarity isn't always safe. She confessed the fallout. Her company had come down hard when my infidelity exposed went public, colleagues had whispered in hallways, and the man she'd left me for was transferred out of state. She'd begged him to tell his fiancée the truth. When he blamed her for everything, they'd split. Emily's voice broke as she begged forgiveness, but I stayed silent. I couldn't pretend to be the same man who believed her every word in quiet kitchens. When she paused, eyes shiny with regret, I inhaled the crisp air, pine-scented and untainted by betrayal. I told her I was sorry she'd suffered fallout, but her mistakes had no place in my future. I stood and brushed dust from my jeans. "I wish you well, Emily," I said, voice steady. "But this story doesn't have room for us anymore." Walking back to the trailer, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. The bench, the cafe, the crossroads with Emily, all of it belonged to the past. Ahead lay Lucy's warm laughter, trail runs at sunrise, and quiet nights under endless stars. Behind me was only the echo of closing doors and the promise of roads I'd face on my own. Part 5. A restless wind rattled the trailer window the morning Emily showed up unannounced. I sat on the scuffed love seat, elbows on my knees, scanning the faded wood grain pattern as she leaned against the doorframe. Her eyes searched mine, pleading without words. Finally, I asked, "What do you want, Emily?" She stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to stray," she insisted, cheeks flushed. Office politics cornered me, and Mark, he has a way about him. Charming, persuasive. I let myself believe I deserved his attention. She paused, fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. I hated myself for it. I drank too much to numb the guilt. I folded my arms, blinking away the sting of old wounds. "You chose to cross the line," I said steadily. "You knew what you were risking." Her gaze dropped. "Yes," she admitted. "The moment you left, I ended it with him. I needed to find you, see if there was a chance to start over, even though we're divorced." Her words hung in the air like smoke. I closed my eyes and exhaled, the porch swings creak a soundtrack to my racing thoughts. "There's no reset button for what you did," I replied. "You shattered us the night I followed you to that motel. Do you think I can just overlook everything?" Emily's shoulders slumped, and tears gathered in her eyes. She reached for my hand. "I love you, Jack. Before I left, I didn't know how much you meant to me. You broke me as much as I broke you." Her voice trembled. "I can't forgive myself until I've earned it." Despite myself, I stood and pulled her into a cautious embrace. Her sobs pressed soft against my shoulder, and my heart twisted, sympathy tangled with betrayal. When her tears slowed, I led her down the narrow path behind the trailer to a hidden bench under a tall cedar. Once she'd settled, I asked, "How did you track me here? Did you hire someone?" She shook her head with a faint laugh. "No private detective, just Stacy. She slipped and mentioned you'd been spotted at the coffee shop." I begged her for details. Emily's cheeks reddened at the betrayal of her friend. The revelation made me smile wryly. "So Stacy's the reason you've been patrolling Main Street." I paused, letting the breeze dry her tears. "That's persistent." To clear the tension, I suggested dinner at the Rusty Oak Bistro down the road. No alcohol, so no excuses. Under stringed Edison bulbs, our plates clinked and conversation drifted from trivial work gossip to memories of our first date. For a moment, I almost forgot the gulf between us. When the check arrived, Emily reached across the table. "I haven't dated anyone else," she assured, voice earnest. "You're the only one I want." My gut tightened. "It's too soon," I said. "I'm not ready to walk that path again." She nodded, I solemn. "If you'll ever consider counseling, real therapy, I'd wait 10 years to heal with you." Her sincerity caught me off guard. "Perhaps," I murmured, "but not now." Outside, I walked her to her car. She clutched my hands and looked into my eyes. "I'll always love you, Jack," she whispered. Even as her words struck deep, I felt the finality of my decision. That night, I ran beneath a sky so clear the stars felt close enough to touch. Back in the trailer, I cracked open a cold beer, listening to the hiss as I unscrewed the cap. I reflected on how far I'd come, the broken vows, the fresh trails, the peace I'd carved from betrayal. When I saw Emily's email pop up the next morning, long apologies, promises to visit again, hopes of reconciliation, I deleted it without a second thought. I'd chosen this life, solitude that healed, friendships that uplifted, and the open expanse of possibility beyond mistakes. My final advice to anyone haunted by infidelity: break free, rebuild on your own terms, and remember that forgiveness is earned, not granted. The past may cast long shadows, but ahead lies a road unbroken, waiting for you to step onto it. The end.